Welcome back to the discussion, Taking Action to Ensure Fairness and Equity in Housing, How Government and the Real Estate Industry Can Work Together, sponsored by Bright MLS on WTOP.com. My guests today are Amit Kulkarni, the Chief Marketing Officer for Bright MLS, Dr. Lisa Sturtevant, the Chief Economist for Bright MLS, and Congressman Glenn Ivey, the U.S. Representative for Maryland's 4th District. So we've talked about a lot about these challenges that many people have, but there are also some things that work in favor of the consumer right now. And Amit, one of them is the fact that people now have a lot more choices about where they can go to figure out where the inventory is. But while they may know about these choices, they don't necessarily know where the data come from. And I wonder if you could explain that.
Yes, Mitchell. I think choice number one is it's awesome. I think consumers should have choice. There's a number of real estate portals or platforms that consumers can search on. But I think what a lot of consumers don't know is those platforms don't exist without the MLS. The MLS is the source of truth of the data that powers those platforms. And I think if we really talk about a real estate transaction, that is something that's maybe the most important thing a person or a family does within their lifetime. And if we take a look at the traffic of those platforms, 300 million, the top 20 in any given month. 300 million, that's more than the adult population of the United States.
Wow.
Yet, 400,000 homes sell every month. So regardless of how many people come to search on those platforms, you're still going to get about 400,000 homes selling every month. Those platforms are not driving demand. In fact, I view them as informational, but more infotainment. When the rubber meets the road, and people get really serious about buying and selling a home, they go to the MLS. 85 to 90% of transactions that are facilitated in the United States are actually facilitated through the MLS. And that's because that is the pristine source of truth. And agents and consumers working together through the MLS is how business gets done, because that's important for people. They don't want the infotainment when it gets down to actually putting together, like Lisa, $420,000 purchase. You want the real information and the real data and the real facts so you can make the best decision for you and your family.
And would either you can answer this or Lisa can answer this? I mean, are we at a point where we're really at the most transparent point we've been up to this date in terms of real estate and what's out there for consumers?
I think that here at the MLS, we are constantly working to ensure that all of the data and all the process is transparent. But there are operators out there that are sort of taking some of that transparency away and leaving the consumers a little bit uncertain about what is going on and what the actual truth is about a particular property or where it is in the market. And so, as Amit mentioned, the extent to which the MLS is sort of the source of the most reliable and accurate information about the listing, that is the entire goal of the MLS, is to make sure that consumers are never hidden from that information.
And Congressman, I wanted to talk to you about one of the really, literally the biggest developments in the Washington area over the last few decades, and I can see you're smiling because you know the FBI headquarters actually did get awarded to Greenbelt after a long and arduous battle with
just
the state
13
of Virginia.
years, yeah.
But who's counting?
Yeah.
Obviously, Virginia still has something to say about that, but looking at how Maryland's delegation, framed this as a means of helping to address some of these issues that we've talked about. I wonder if you could talk about the significance of this decision and what it means economically and in terms of housing.
Well, I mean, it could have a very big effect on the housing in the area, because it's going to bring a lot of workers. I think it's going to be up to 7,500 potentially. It's, depending on how you count it, $3 billion, $4 billion or so to build it. It'll be in the middle of what I call our research triangle. You got the Agriculture Research Center, NASA Goddard, University of Maryland, NOAA's there as well. So there's a lot of talent there, a lot of scientists and cybersecurity issues and economic development opportunities. I think the FBI headquarters will fit in with that perfectly. In some instances, just cybersecurity and other issues like that, but also just the synergy that it could bring. So I think that's a very positive development. Having said that, for the topic we're talking about today, affordability of housing, it could challenge that because I think it'll drive housing prices up. That'll make it an even more attractive area to live. So there's going to be some challenges there. But I think Prince George's County, at least in the region, the DMV area, we're still probably the best from an affordability standpoint. So we've got challenges that we're facing that'll be exacerbated also by Purple Line and some of those as well. But I think we still are in a better shape from the standpoint of trying to help people find houses and get their start in the housing market, in contrast to some of the more expensive areas.
And for those people who are out there thinking about buying a home or dealing with some of these challenges, I did read, Lisa, that there is some talk that the interest rates actually may moderate a little bit, not a lot, but moving forward, that might be a little bit of sunlight for people out there looking for a home.
Yeah, we are going to see mortgage rates drop from their sort of 2-decade highs that we saw earlier this fall. We're also seeing inventory expand a little bit. We're starting to see a little bit more options. In a place like Prince George's County, where there's so much economic development, the key really is going to make sure that that we continue to build enough housing, right, to meet demand. In fact, housing really is a critical component of economic development. Without people to fill the jobs, it's really hard to sustain that level of economic development. I like to say housing is where the workers sleep at night. So you sort of need the housing in order to maintain the workforce. So while as we look forward to sort of the short term, mortgage rates will come down a little bit, inventory will come up a little bit, but we really do have a longer term structural shortfall in terms of the amount of housing that's been built, not only in the Washington area, but really across the country. That's been ongoing for the last couple of decades. So as the real estate community works with local, state, and federal government, really supply and new construction has to be top of mind to ensure that there is enough housing to meet the demand of those who are serving in our workforce.
And this obviously is a unique area. It has a lot of the problems of issues of other parts of the country, but with the federal government being such a big part of where we are here, the rising real estate market, I just wondered, and anyone can answer this, if the government and the real estate industry are to work together to solve the fair housing challenges that we've talked about, what are some of the things that you think it will take?
I mean, one of the trade-offs that the nation's trying to work through, but especially the District of Columbia, is how many people are going to start coming back to the office 5 days a week. And so one of the things I think we saw during the pandemic when the prices jumped, where people were like, well, I'm in my house all day, every day. Maybe I'll get a bigger house or, put an addition onto the back. So some of the housing values went up, had a tougher impact on the District of Columbia. Still had very expensive housing, but then in the downtown area, office space struggled and the like, and they're starting to look at creative things like maybe converting offices to residences and those sorts of things. But I think here in the DMV, there's a real sort of delicate dance as we go through that. It's been great for Prince George's County workers who had been commuting to DC every day. It saves them a lot of time, helps with their family and the like, reduces traffic. But I know there's an impact on our neighbors next door that they want to try and deal with as well.
Right. I think I even read that at one point Prince George's County was losing people to Calvert County because, again, it's that age-old thing where people move out farther and farther to get more property, more bang for the buck, if you will. Do you think, Lisa, we're going to remain kind of in this transitive period here for the next few years, especially coming out of the pandemic, all these things that kind of really change things in terms of home ownership and how we look at home ownership?
Yeah, and how we treat home as not just a place to live, but also a place to work, a place to learn. We were using our homes for so many more things. And I think that's going to continue for a little while. I think there's going to be more of a momentum to get folks back into the office, I think for a lot of different reasons. But I do think this sort of remote work is going to be with us for a time to come. I think it really does sort of hit home, though, how important it is to think about housing regionally. Because as you mentioned, Congressman Ivey, it's not just about Prince George's County, it's about DC, it's about Alexandria, it's about Montgomery and Calvert, because people can live and work in so many different places around the region. So if we think about housing affordability and housing supply, we can't think about it as a DC problem or a Prince George's County problem or a Fairfax County problem. It really is sort of what are we doing to ensure that the Washington area is as strong a region as it can be, and really any region across the country, thinking about how to strengthen its economy by ensuring that folks have the opportunity to live near where they work if they need to then begin commuting back into the office.
And Amit, you talked about the fact that people have a lot more choices now, and as well as this huge database that MLS has. Are we still seeing people checking things out a lot, people doing their homework or even just for infotainment saying, ooh, that house in Northern Virginia certainly looks inviting, here I am, wherever.
I think for sure people are doing that. I think I think we all know real estate has been the nation's largest spectator sport over the past 3 or 4 years.
That's true.
But I think if we can talk about how we can work together, government, to help this industry move forward, I think I look at my own story. First generation immigrant. My parents came from nothing. My mom grew up in a 1-bedroom house with no running water. My dad was in boarding school from when he was 4 years old. Came here in the 60s and 70s. I wouldn't be where I am if they didn't have, they weren't afforded home ownership, and that allowed me to go to a better school. The equity allowed them to send me to college. So I think I am living proof on why equitable access to housing helps people who come from nothing actually make something out of their lives. And I think if we can work together with local and state governments to enhance consumer protections, to ensure that brokers market fairly, ensure transparency and equitable access to all the listings, that's so critically important. This is a very visceral comment for me because I'm living it, right? So I think taking that away from people, let me take a step back. The rates of homeowners for white Americans are far higher than any other ethnic minority, period. And that housing is a fundamental human right. We shouldn't have to decide if you get housing based on your skin color. It is a basic fundamental human right. And I think if we can build and bake in those consumer protections that allow everybody, regardless of their skin color or whatever, to have access to that same housing that everybody else has access to, that to me that's critically important. So I'd love to see us work together with the legislators at all levels to make sure we can make that happen.
And Congressman, as you mentioned, you've lived some of this too, and your family has lived this too. What are your thoughts about where we move forward? Are you encouraged by some of the developments? Obviously, there's some challenges that we've talked about as well.
I think it's in our hands right now from the standpoint of sort of state and federal choices that we might make to encourage these things. Also, there's some industry issues as well that I think we have to keep in mind. They're facing a lot of pressures and everything, and sometimes the market doesn't take the communities in the directions we'd like them to go. But having said that, I think at least in this region, integration has worked well over the years. I think there have been some backsliding in a lot of jurisdictions, and that's reflected pretty significantly in the schools. If you go visit some of the schools, you'd think it was 1963 or something. But I think we have to keep working to move those things in the right direction, making sure that we have housing availability, making sure that if there's discrimination out there, we're taking steps to enforce against it. But really the biggest piece, I think, is allowing everybody to participate in the economy, have their opportunities to get jobs, develop their own wealth, and expand their families in that way.
And Lisa, lastly, just looking at the overall region, one of the big positives has been the economy and the fact that for all the challenges that we've talked about, this is a growing area that a lot of other parts of the country, frankly, are a little bit jealous of. Yeah, no, the Washington area economy tends to do very well. We have a large, stable employer in the form of the federal government, but increasingly have a more diversified economy, a lot of professional and technical services, a growing science sector on the Maryland side, as well as federal contractors on the Northern Virginia side. Our unemployment rate is as low as it's ever been. People who want a job can typically find a job, but the icing on the cake really has been that wages have been growing much faster in the Washington area than they have been in recent years. And so this is a place people want to be. This is a place with a great quality of life. This is a place where housing is expensive, but to the extent that we can continue to make sure there's enough, there are options for people to have access to housing in the area, that will only continue to make the Washington area a great place to be. All right, well, on that positive note, I want to thank all of our guests. I'm WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Again, thanking our guests, Amit Kulkarni, the Chief Marketing Officer for Bright MLS, Dr. Lisa Sturtevant, the Chief Economist for Bright MLS, and Congressman Glenn Ivey, the U.S. Representative for Maryland's 4th District. Again, I'm your moderator, Mitchell Miller. For more on this discussion, visit WTOP.com and search Bright MLS.